Good morning, Jamie.
Hey, good morning, Shadab. How are you doing on this fine day outside?
I was actually at the head office, Microsoft head office in Seattle this week, and I believe you were also traveling. So it's been a bit crazy week, but thankfully, not a whole lot of things. That's what I thought until Thursday, and then suddenly things started dropping in AI world, which we need to cover today.
Yeah, that's always the case. Yeah, you think you're gonna have a quiet week, and then stuff just hits. And yeah, I was. We were both traveling. I was traveling for work as well. So it's always demanding when you're. It's a good thing when you're flying around, working with customers, and getting a chance to do real world stuff, not just talking on the podcast, which is great because we get that's where we get a lot of insights from, just for the audience. We're not just out here just talking about it, we're actually doing these things. And this is what helps us bring real world experiences to, our podcast. So,
True. I
uh,
mean, like both Jimmy and I, we meet lots of customers, and that's what really gives us the great insight because we have talked about it a lot, right? It's not just about the research and the engineering side, it's really about the deployment and the development side and how the applications are emerging. That's where the real focus and the battles are. In fact,
yeah,
that's what we will talk about in one of the report that came out from MIT Project Nanda. It talks about the 95% of Gen AI pilots are failing, right? I mean, so a lot to talk about on that front. But we'll also talk about how, this new concept is emerging where the seemingly conscious AI is being talked about. And Mustafa Suleiman, the CEO of Microsoft AI, came back strong against it this week.
yeah, yeah. We'll cover up a lot of things, everything from rapid fire news to DeepSeek to Meta, to some plans that OpenAI has, and we'll get into some things that Google has shared over the last week as far as their um, made by Google, and just things to really understand about that, as well as there's news as well from Microsoft and Mistral as new features come to the market for people to try. So you'll get all that and more as we go through today's episode.
Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be back after a short introduction. Greetings. Welcome to the AI Files podcast. If you're looking to stay up to date on the AI, this is the podcast for you. I'm Shadab Hussain. I'm the director of AI at Microsoft, and I'm your co-host.
Hello, everybody. Jamie Basilico, as you know already. I'm the other co-host here for the AI Files. My day job is a data and AI technical specialist and architect. And as a reminder, please note this is not an official Microsoft channel, so the views and opinions expressed by myself and Shadab are our own and do not represent the views of Microsoft.
So, Jamie, this week, let's start with this SCAI. And I'm not talking about Skynet. This is a new abbreviation that I heard about, SCAI, SCAI, which is basically seemingly conscious AI. And I read about that in Mustafa Suleiman's post, and he talked about this. And I'm going to quote him as part of our quote of the week here. So, quoting him, seemingly conscious AI is the illusion that an AI is a conscious entity. It's not, but it replicates markers of consciousness so convincingly that it seems indistinguishable from you or I claiming we are conscious. To be clear, there is zero evidence of AI consciousness today, and some people believe we won't see it in the future either. But that's what is so concerning about Sky. If people perceive it as conscious, that perception is their reality. Even if the consciousness itself is not real, the social impacts certainly are. But some academics are already exploring model welfare, which will only fuel and validate consciousness delusions. Reports of those delusions, like AI psychosis and unhealthy attachments, keep rising. As hard as it may be to hear, this is not something confined to people already at risk of mental health issues. It is something that could affect and manipulate any one of us. Dismissing these as fringe cases only help them continue. And then he continues on. He says that AI companies should not claim or encourage the idea that their AIs are conscious. Their AI should not either. And then at the end, he says that to me, it is about building a positive vision of AI that supports what it means to be human. AI should optimize for the needs of the user, not ask the user to believe it has needs itself. Its reward system should be built accordingly. I want to build AI that makes someone's life better, not AI that pretends it wants a life of its own. I hope the industry does too. Unquote. So this is from Mustafa Suleiman, Jamie, and this is pertaining to the fact that there has been of late a lot of talk about that. Okay, does AI have rights? Is AI sentient? There's even a concept of AI or moral welfare kind of thing, right? So I mean, there is like people are even talking about the does AI has rights, right? Recently, Claude actually gave Anthropic gives Claude certain ability to actually end the conversation if it seems like like not going in the right direction or being in harassment, right? So like this is really against that notion that AI should be anthropomorphized, right? I mean, in a way that you consider it equivalent to human and give it certain rights, even if so. Basically, the consciousness is what he's encountering about. So this is the ongoing debate that has started emerging a lot now in the industry, and this is what was Mustafa Suleiman's position this week.
Yeah, I read this as well, and I was listening to a couple of other podcasts as they talked through this. It, there's definitely limits what these foundational companies and things that they'll build around the models themselves. I don't know if I would call this example I'm about to give consciousness. It was in the news, I don't know, probably about 2 or 3 months ago, where it was some of the models. It was actually the Anthropic models where it was putting out information, and I'm going to call it like protectionism of itself based upon chat interactions that it had with some of its red teaming members. Now, do I consider that consciousness? No, because to me, it's just an innate learning that it was trained upon on like, hey, you're going to do this to me, I'm going to do this back to you. And I'm citing some of the examples. It was actually blackmailing some of the folks that wanted to change, its parameters and the things that it was doing. It was literally going to be like, hey, I'm going to tell your wife you're cheating on her. Obviously, it was making up things, but it was only to protect itself. But I bring that up because I don't think that's a case where it was actually had a consciousness and the consciousness to preserve. And this is why, I use this as an example. We as humans, we have our beings, whether or not you believe in souls or just our life preservation mechanism, like things that are, just, we don't even think about it. That's part of our consciousness to survive. So is that an example where the AI system itself was like, oh, you're not going to pull the plug on me. I'm going to try to find a way to survive. Is that an example of consciousness? I don't think so. Again, I go back to just a matter of training. Could we be there one day where these systems do have consciousness? I think it's potentially plausible. I'm not going to say it's not possible. And then you get into all these other scenarios. All right, well, if it's got consciousness, do we apply rules and laws to protect that? To me, that's way off on the deep end as it relates to like overthinking what these machines and systems, because at the end of the day, they are just machines and systems. They're not living, breathing things that have a consciousness. And this, tying back to, the quote of the week here in terms of what Mustafa said, his position again is that we're not trying to create some things that have consciousness, and hopefully other companies either abide by or align with or agree with that premise, is that we're not trying to validate consciousness within these different models, at least not today. So,
True. I mean, I
anyway.
think this is something that I think I would say probably polarizing the AI community actually a bit. You know, I feel that it's not something a unilateral position or a very dominant position. Either way, people are there is a camp that believes that AI has rights and it deserves certain rights, and it already kind of they already humanize it. The others are like, of course, they say that no, there's no consciousness, it's just a technology. And while there is third camp, I would say that who don't believe, but they believe that it is heading towards that becoming sentient. And so it's already like creating multiple camps, and then we'll see. But it's an interesting discussion.
Yeah, definitely. And this definitely takes me down the path of science fiction and movies, and we could all point to things where, like, systems take over, whether it's Skynet or Hull or anything else. Anyway, back to things where we're talking about AI and private privacy concerns. XAI made the news, but probably not in the way that they wanted to this week. So if any of you use Grok, by the way, I use every tool. Most of them, whether it's the free version or not, I do pay for some. I did pay for Grok for a little while just to like test out more of the advanced features. So I'm familiar with the Grok interface and using it. There's the ability on Grok to actually share out your chats, which at the surface level is great. I could share that conversation with somebody, maybe in an email or text message or any other means. And in some cases I've done that, not necessarily with Grok, but I do that with ChatGPT and Copilot to share out, my interaction. All right. So that's great. However, if you're using the share button in Grok, what sort of came out this week is XAI is actually sharing that your chat when you share with search engines, things like Google, things like Bing, things like DuckDuckGo. So basically your search, as long as you make it shareable, or if you make it shareable, is actually searchable by anybody on the web. So that means when you hit that share button with the conversation or whatever you're searching, it's sending out there. Now, the big thing is if there were proper quote unquote disclaimers or warnings, I don't think this would have been that big of a news because, hey, if you're doing it, you're willingly then putting all of your chat and whatever you may be doing. And again, we learned over the last couple of weeks that people are using these chat engines as their best friends, their therapists. So you might be, putting in some deep personal things inside these chats. So not having a knowledge that that is being shared with search engines and being public knowledge, that's not a good thing. So and to back that up, Forbes actually was looking at some of these numbers. I think that's where it came out first. There were more than 370,000 user conversations within the search engine. And these are deep conversations with Grok and the user and the LLM, everything from like simple business tasks, like help me write this tweet or email, all the way up to like fictitious images that are being created because Grok's got a pretty good image creator. That if these things go up on the search engines and people are going to just think, oh my God, this is real, where it's not. So I mean, you go from fake news basically that's going to be created just unbeknowingly to personal information being disclosed to if you're writing things in business on Grok, which again I don't recommend you do, but those are all things that are exposed. They're out there right now. So hopefully you're not using Grok, Shadab, and haven't hit the shared button. You looked a little worried there for a second.
I'm not in Elon's camp. So, and I would definitely worry, like whoever it is, like if our chats, like, and this is something that Jimmy, even like Sam Altman has also expressed about, right? That because this could become, like in this case, like there's supposedly the user is sharing, but I don't know if the user was really aware of it. But I think this is a real concern, right? What if your chat history now becomes available to the agencies, right? I mean, the people are going to be very, very cautious about that and conscious about it because it is something of a touchy subject, right? Apple has refused the access to their devices to the agencies. But what if, let's say, the OpenAI or Anthropic and others are forced to reveal the chat history because many of these chats are very intimate, right? I mean, this is a very touchy subject, but I think this will continue to boil.
Yeah, I think at the very least, I'm sure if they're not already working on it, they will be come next week to put some disclaimers. Hey, if you share this, this will be shared with X, Y, and Z, or at least maybe there's an opt out of where it would be shared. They would be smart to do that. We'll see. Anyway, switching gears a little bit, some rapid fire news here. DeepSeek released their version 3.1 of their open weights, which is their non-thinking model. This one has 685 billion parameters. I kind of look at this as it's kind of following suit from what OpenAI just released with their 2 open source models. So this is open weights. And again, the whole reason why open weights is you can see how these models are actually looking at various different parameters that will help with the determination as it goes through its logic or reasoning, or not reasoning, but the logic inside the model itself. So again, that's been released by DeepSeek just this past week. Meta also introduced a partnership with Midjourney on being able to create AI imaging and video models, again, following suit with whether it's OpenAI, Google, and obviously Grok has their capabilities around imaging that they recently updated as well. So Meta again is just getting into this space. What I find interesting is it's the partnership with Midjourney. I think we've talked a little bit before. Not that Meta's had major mishaps or major missteps. There were some things that I would say they kind of slowed down with Llama, and this to me is the way of them expanding the things they could do with these partnerships. So a good thing. You've got some things for Coinbase.
Yes, I mean, I wanted to quickly talk about the Coinbase. This got into news a little bit because what Coinbase CEO, he explained that why he fired some of the engineers who did not try AI immediately. So what happened was that Coinbase actually bought the bunch of licenses for all their engineers for the GitHub Copilot and Cursor, and they expected them to use. And there were some concerns from their leaders that, okay, it will take some time. It may take months to even get their half of their engineers to actually start using it. So he became like brute force, and he said that, okay, it's a mandate that everybody has to use it by the end of the week. And whoever is not, need to have a conversation on Saturday, would like to understand why they are not using it. And then what happened is then they get on the conversation, and many of the people were, of course, on vacation. They were not using it, right? So, I mean, probably excused reason. And there were others who could not satisfactorily explain why they could not use it, and they were immediately fired, right? But what I found a little bit more perplexing is that, like, for example, it's not that the people were given a lot of time or even the training to use it, right? Like in the quotation that is attributed to the Coinbase CEO, he said, quoting him, I said AI is important. We need you to all learn it and at least on board. You don't have to use it every day yet until we do some training, but at least on board by end of the week. And if not, I'm hosting a meeting on Saturday with everybody who hasn't done it, and I would like to meet with you to understand why. Unquote. So, the thing is that, yeah, training is not done, but the least expectation was to at least probably onboard and maybe just create an account and things like that. It just refers to the new set of expectation, the baseline that the organizations now have. They're investing heavily in the AI tools and they expect the returns. They want to see the returns as quickly as possible. So if the licenses are available, it is something that they want everybody to start using it. Of course, they're paying for it, but they also want to see the returns. So I would say that it's a good way that it is being enabled. A lot of organizations are enabling their workforce with the AI tools, but I think it all comes with a set of expectation that people have to remember. And then I also, just a quick thing, Apple is in talks to use Google Gemini for Siri revamp. It's not a confirmed decision. It's something that they are exploring. Apple is still struggling. It's just perplexing, Jamie, that how a company like Apple still hasn't been able to figure out. I mean, it seems like the model development anybody can do, and except Apple, right? I mean, they're not able to figure this out, and they're just so dependent on others. I mean, it's just surprising, to be honest, right? I mean, you could even take the open source models and tune them and do things, but even that they are not able to figure it out, right? I mean, it's just unbelievable that company like Apple is falling short and apart when it comes to AI. It is. I've
Yeah.
started to doubt, Apple's, you know, like ability to stay. This would not happen, I believe, if Mr. Jobs was around.
Yeah, this one is definitely perplexing. Like you said, they've had missteps and miscalculations on what and how to do. I was actually doing something on my, I think I was driving the other day, and asked Siri for something, and it took me into a Chat GPT search, which is great. It asked you for permission, but it still wasn't, the great experience that I was looking for or would expect from Apple and my iPhone. So I find two things out of that. One, yeah, it definitely needs to be improved. Two, there already is a working relationship with OpenAI. So I'm kind of curious, obviously, you and I don't have this inner knowledge of what Apple's truly going to do, but are they going to push OpenAI and that partnership aside? Is it totally going to be Google? Is it going to be parts of the iOS for some that's going to use OpenAI and Google from the other? Hopefully it's not like that, because I think that will make things a mess and probably wouldn't work out. So time will tell if it's going to be Gemini for everything.
True.
So speaking of OpenAI, just real quick, OpenAI announced they're going to be opening up an office in New Delhi, but they're also going to be expanding the footprint for its plans and offers. So they're going to be starting out with something called ChatGPT Go, which is literally a new plan, quote unquote pricing plan. It's only going to be available in India first. It's going to be a sub $5 for US. We'll see what the actually, I don't know how to say this in India, but whatever the India currency is, $3.99.
Rupees. Yep.
Yeah, Ruby. So that's what the pricing is going to be. So it basically, think of the free plan, and then they're going to add extended capabilities, which basically means you're going to be able to do more quote unquote chats, or use extended access to GPT-5, like more use of that flagship model, be able to create more images, be able to do file uploads for analyzing and working with document spreadsheets, be able to use advanced data analysis tools, but just not to the extent of what you're going to be able to do with the GPT, Chat GPT Plus model or the Pro. So that's kind of where they're putting it. The one thing that I did note, if you go to the OpenAI website, this is being targeted to India first, but they do point out right there other countries and regions may be eligible for this plan in the future. So it's driving costs down. Is it going to come to the US? Have no idea. But maybe for other countries, or especially where they want to make more inroads, this could be a nice sort of intro plan, other than just using the free one.
It's a good price point for India for sure. Um, it's already there, one of the fastest or the fastest growing market, I think, at this time, and it's just going to help them a lot more to actually grow there. All right, let's talk about Google. Google, at their recent Made by Google event, of course, they launched their devices, and it was mostly focused on the devices. So they launched their Google's Pixel 10 Pro Fold, for example. It's like a foldable phone, and then it comes with lots of bunch of features. We're not going to focus a lot on the hardware, but more on the AI features. But the 10 Pro Fold actually comes equipped with the company's upgraded Tensor G5 processor, which actually enables a lot of features, right? And it's particularly useful for AI. Tensor is a framework and the spec that Google has for their AI chips. Now, it's expensive. Jamie, that phone is 10 Pro Fold actually starts at $1,799, right? With
Oh,
tax and other things, that would actually be almost $2,000. That's huge. Um, but that's where it is heading, right? I mean, the Pixels are actually expensive set of phone, but they do come with a lot of features. For example, let's talk about this like G5 chip. This is most advanced silicon to date, enabling like on-device AI processing, right? So a lot of edge-based AI use cases will be launched, and they came out with a bunch of AI features. For example, let's talk about the Magic Q, CUE, and then this is like a contextual AI assistant that provides proactive and relevant suggestion. For example, if somebody asks you in the text that okay, in the messages that okay, hey, when is your flight landing? With the integration, which you can actually configure and approve, etc., through the Gmail and calendar and other thing, it can tell you immediately the information that, okay, you are landing at this time, which you can easily copy and paste, right? So it's very helpful if you are okay with Google to actually be able to access and harness the information that you already have in the connected apps, right? Um, Certainly, it is not for the privacy conscious people, but it could be actually very helpful in those cases. And then there were other features, for example, Camera Coach, which is basically an AI driven assistant that help you capture better photos through real time, like guided suggestions, right? So it will help you doing that. It will help you tell you about, maybe the lighting or the move closer or things like that, right? So it's basically giving the coaching on the spot. Then there is in Gemini Live. Gemini Live is basically a feature um, which with you can point the camera and then in real time it can see it and then you can talk about it and help you understand this and all those things. So it basically is an expansion. Now it can help you like troubleshooting or cooking help or like having a follow-up conversation, right? So it's just an expansion and enrichment of that feature. And then there's a voice translate, which is basically delivering real-time translation of the phone conversation while preserving the speaker's voice across multiple languages. I think that's really cool because, you know, many times when you do translation, the voice is synthetic and then, it doesn't feel that personal, right? Because you miss out on that person's voice. But in this case, you can actually preserve that person's voice. There is also this pixel journal, which you can use actually to maintain the journals. And this is basically powered by Gen AI. It includes AI generated writing prompts and insights for journaling. Notebook LM, which is like huge and it went viral for that podcast. You can generate the podcast, based on the documents and whatever that you feed in. Now you can also include the screenshots and voice transcript inputs as well as part of that, like the reference that you give to the Notebook LM. Then there's a recorder app that basically converts humming or singing into music in the user's chosen genre and basically transform the audio input into AI generated composition. That would be, I think, very interesting. I do want to try it out. I
Yeah.
haven't tried it out yet.
As you're
Um,
mentioning that, I'm like, I'm definitely gonna be trying out Notebook LM, but that recorder app sounds kind of cool.
yeah, exactly. And then I'm gonna try it out if it works for me because I'm like pretty clumsy when it comes to the music. I can't even hum properly, but I'm gonna try that out. And then there is the Gboard's AI-powered writing tools, which basically helps you refine or rewrite text in different styles, from the keyboard essentially. And then finally, there was a Gemini for Home. It's basically a next generation Google Assistant powered by the Gemini AI model. It is designed for more natural, context-aware, and conversational smart home control. These are a bunch of features that Google actually just released. And mind you, like I mean, it's unbelievable. Probably this year, I've not seen any company releasing more features than the Google has done so far in the AI world. And
Yeah,
maybe
I
after
was gonna
followed
say,
by Anthropic.
yeah, I was gonna say Google is definitely on fire. They're hitting on all cylinders on the things that they're creating, not only in the on the foundational models, but then practical uses of that. And I think that's the important part. They're really flexing their muscle on their reach from the consumer, the customer, not only from like again the core models themselves, but things that we touch every day, whether it's the phone or tools and services inside of our home. So they're leveraging their AI advancements and breakthroughs in things that we use every day, thus making it more, I don't want to say like more ingrained, but it's just a natural everyday occurrence that we're going to be interacting with AI features, whether or not you know it or not.
Two.
So, um, so with that, let's talk about some additional foundational models, not from Google itself, but this one's from Mistral. So this is more along the lines of the partnership with Microsoft and other foundational model providers. As I mentioned before, this was from Mistral. So they actually released a document AI capabilities inside of the Azure AI Foundry models. So this one is focused on literally being enabling organizations through the use of serverless APIs. So this is really models as a service. This is focused on um, being able to work with documents, and it's really zeroes in on three different things. One is document parsing. So being able to take something like a PDF and then be able to extract out the things, whether or not it's text, but be able to do tables, charts, as well as like formatted equations, and be able to interpret what those things are and provide on the other end of that API to that developer the things that it just quote unquote parsed. Microsoft does have its own document parsing capabilities, which is called document intelligence, and then there's something called content understanding. But this is another tool in that arsenal, and I'll tell you one very important reason why this could be seen as a very important step. It's the fact that Mistral, if you don't know, is a European-based country. It's actually, I'm sorry, European-based company based out of France. So this is where it could support actually sovereign cloud customers. So think about the ring fence in some of the European AI-based laws, which is definitely more strict than they are elsewhere. So this could certainly help out those companies that are based in Europe. So going back to the capabilities, again, document parsing, it is multilingual, so it does support various different languages, but it's also multimodal. As I mentioned before, yeah, it can do text, but it could also do different visual elements, making it well suited for like a diverse global set of information that's coming in, especially on the multilingual side. And it has structured output as well as doc as prompts. So this document AI delivers results in things like JSON, which can be used by different databases or other AI agents. So this would really be used in a lot of those use cases that focus around retrieval augmented generation, aka RAG, where the document becomes the prompt for subsequent queries. So a typical use case. Again, I go back to the use cases, whether it's that document digitation, knowledge extraction, perhaps maybe used in RAG. So again, an important step not only for Mistral, but also the allowance or use of that model on the Azure AI Foundry platform. Again, thus making available to all people that utilize and leverage the Azure AI Foundry ecosystem.
Awesome. And let's talk about another, you know, addition in the Azure AI Foundry as well, which was recently announced, I think, a few weeks ago. We could not cover it earlier. So this is browser automation tool in Azure AI Foundry. So it is like a computer use agent. Essentially, what it does is it actually helps you take the real world actions just like a user would do on a browser, right? So you can automate certain tasks, which could be like, for example, filling a form or doing a research on certain objects, right? Or essentially doing a multi-turn conversation, just like a user do. Like you remember the computer use agent, that's what really the browser automation tool does with certain enhancements. So, for example, it's basically an agent. It performs real browser tasks using natural language prompt via Microsoft Playwright Workspaces. Playwright Workspaces is basically a company Playwright that actually provides a lot of testing and automation tools. So this is actually from that company. It's LLM powered as well, but it has its own Playwright Workspaces, and it uses that as an agent to create this kind of solution. It basically starts a sandboxed browser session that mimics real user behavior. So it's a sandbox, which means that you're protected, and you don't have to manage the VMs. It is managed environment, and it is kind of containerized. It can operate in a loop, like agent sends action, the tool will execute them and then capture the updated browser state and returns it until completion. So it's a multi-turn conversation. It allows that it can actually do the iteration on that, so it can completely do it again and again. It's not just like one task execution. Yeah, users can refine the request during the automated browsing flow. It is useful for tasks, for example, like booking or reservations or product discovery or form filling or navigating e-commerce or scheduling platforms. And then the way you do that, basically you set a kind of a playwright workspace, and then you actually use that as an agent within the Azure AI Foundry. It creates a sandbox version, and then you kind of give a prompt, right, commands, and then it will execute on top of that. um, the caution is that essentially, of course, there are any computer use agent right now has a security risk, so you need to be aware of where you're running it. And that's why this solution is, I think, pretty good, because it runs within your Azure environment. It also is sandbox, so it kind of bring that kind of protection. But that feature is now available. It requires some gating request approval, etc., so it's not by default available. But this is a good option if companies want to try the computer use agent kind of use cases. Okay, Jamie, with that, let's also talk about how the AI is being used in different industries, right? One of the example is AI in hiring, for example. And this came out actually on the NBC News earlier. Basically, it talks about how Chipotle has implemented a conversational AI chatbot named Avocado, and it is developed by HR tech firm Paradox to streamline its hiring process. So what happens is that essentially it helps the assistants. Basically, it helps the applicants in filling out the application, answering job-related questions, and scheduling interviews. So it's not like exactly interviewing the applicant, but basically the first step of people applying through this agent and filling out the applications. And it can help, rather than filling the static form, it can actually help the user fill more relevant information, and it can converse with the user to actually fill it more. It will probably have a better success rate. Many times users just give up, the applicants just give up actually filling those clumsy form. It doesn't need to ask the same information to every applicant. It can customize that. It cuts the application time to about 8 minutes, and then it boosts the completion rate to 85%. It also supports multiple languages, because of course company wants more people to apply so that they have a better chance of getting the most suitable candidate. And it cuts down that time that it takes. You can imagine, I mean, it just sometimes just takes enormous time for people to just simply apply to a position. It also helps them reduce time to hire from up to 12 days to just 3.5 days. And then it allows managers to focus more on operations, because it will handle the scheduling and also improve the applicant quality by informing them about the job before interviews. So, the applicants can often be blindsided, but they have no idea. They apply to a job, but they have no idea. They don't understand a lot of information, and not many times they will get an opportunity to ask questions or have a conversation before the interviews. But this agent and assistant can actually help them understand more about the company, about the job, about the process. So much better experience for the applicants, and it also actually cut down the time, so it's like win-win for everyone. um, have you come across these kind of things, Jamie? Like, you know, how do you see this being used in our own day-to-day lives as well, when we do the hiring and screening other thing as well?
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, the whole hiring or HR is certainly a very big and broad area where AI could be leveraged and used. The things that you're just talking about, agent based and helps, the applicants and helps them kind of sift through and apply to the jobs. But there's a flip side also, and that's actually going through the interviews themselves. I typically will conduct several interviews, per quarter here at Microsoft, and I've been doing it for quite a long time. As I think people know, I've been here at Microsoft, at least for those subscribers who don't know or might be listening to this new. I've been at Microsoft for a number of years, and over that time, certainly I've done a lot of interviews. Prior
25
to
years, so that people
yeah,
know. It's a lot.
yeah, prior to the advent of AI or Copilot here in Microsoft, whenever I'm doing an interview, I'm usually taking lots of notes. And the reason is, if you've ever done HR interviews, especially on large companies, you have to provide feedback back into our HR systems to record, like, what were your thoughts, hire, no hire. Part of it is from a legality standpoint as well. You need documented reasons, for hiring or not hiring that person. So again, like I said, probably have done hundreds of interviews at this point. Um, and a lot of that has been very laborious. It's probably one of the things I hated most about running interviews was the work that comes after. Typically, if I'm spending a half hour to an hour in an interview, probably spending another hour afterwards trying to remember all the things I said, look at my notes, and write up the stuff. Anyway, where I was going with this, recently had been part of another interview panel here at Microsoft, filling some of our technical roles, and our HR reps gave us the green light to use Copilot. So um, so Copilot in itself, you might be thinking, well, how does that relate to an interview? These were remote interviews, so we were able to use Teams. And Teams, if you're not aware, you could turn on transcription. Transcription, then I could use Copilot against that transcribed set of dialogue, and I didn't have to worry about taking notes at all through this because I used Copilot to summarize the different areas that I was focusing on and I needed to write up. Now, I didn't ask it to, should I hire this person? But what I did is I used it as part of my rubric and the things that I was looking after to kind of give an assessment. I'll give you a great example on that. Some of the things I was diving into as far as technology, I wanted to get a recap of what the person said. It gave me that recap. And then, as an example, next prompt, I said, please describe the things that were not consistent with X, Y, and Z in terms of technology. And it gave me the things that it spit out. One word of caution, which I always say, please review the things that AI does, because even in those cases where it said, please, summarize the things that the person may have misrepresented, still need to look through it because some of the things that Copilot came out with weren't exactly right, but it saved me probably 95% of the time that I would typically do. So what would have taken an hour for each person that I interviewed, probably only had to spend about 5 minutes. So great time saver. And again, that's the other side of this HR hiring piece and using AI.
Totally agree, Jamie. I also was part of some interviewing a few weeks ago, and using the Copilot for that transcription or even recording was life saving because so much notes is the most hateful part of that process, and it just made it so easy, right, to do that. You can define it, and that way I was able to actually put in a lot more notes compared to others in those the system where you capture the feedback, which could be helpful, right? It's, I think, fair to the candidates, right? It's fair to the hiring managers to be able to see more descriptive notes rather than just very few. Sometimes people just type in very few because it can be very taxing. So
Yep.
great use of actually the AI use case. Finally,
One thing I just want to mention very quickly about that, you do need to notify the candidate that you're looking to use transcription and use it in the process of AI, and they do have the right to say no. So,
yeah.
just from a legal standpoint, that was one of the things that I was instructed by our HR team and legal team to ensure that we had that approval from the candidate.
True. A great point there. Okay, Jamie, one thing that came out this week, which everybody talked about, was a report from MIT Project Nanda. And this report actually was kind of a head turner because this was sensationalized news, and it talks about the 95% of the enterprise generative AI pilots are failing. And you could imagine people pounded upon it, right? I mean, for whatever reason, like it created a divide. Many people say, look, the Gen AI doesn't deliver, right? And the others were like, no, this report is wrong, and they poked the hole in it, right? So I mean, I guess, you know, I just want to give a summary of that report, and some of our we can share our perspectives as well on that. So just a quick background. Project Nanda is something that stands for networked agent something, and I'm forgetting the full form here, but basically it is an initiative that is building the foundational infrastructure for the open agentic web. system where trillions of AI agents can collaborate, communicate, and transact across organizational boundaries without bottlenecks or security vulnerability. So it's kind of like creating that set of index and protocols and tools needed to enable this open agentic web where all the agents across the world can actually find each other, interact with each other. Now, you may say that, oh, sounds like A2A, but the analogy is this: A2A is like basically it's kind of a protocol that helps you create. It's like more like a street level conversation between agent. What Nanda is trying to do is just basically building the entire city, right? So it's a bunch of things, not just a protocol, as part of this initiative. And they came out with this report, which was creating a lot of, raising a lot of eyebrows. So it says that 95% of those AI pilots are failing. Only 5% of the pilots are achieving rapid revenue acceleration. And this was based on 150 interviews, a survey of 350 employees, and analysis of 300 public AI deployments. The startup, the report says that the startups led by young founders have seen revenue growth from $0 to $20 million in 1 year, right? So it's been a huge success for many. And success is attributed to the focused execution, smart partnerships, and solving very specific pain points. That's what they found the pattern of the success, right? The focused execution, smart partnership, and solving specific pain points. On the other hand, the failures are due to a learning gap in tools and organizational integration, not the model quality or the regulation. The generic tools like ChatGPT work really well for individuals, but they struggle in enterprise settings due to lack of workflow adaptation. It also finds that over 50% of AI budgets go to sales and marketing tools. While the back office automation, however, it yields the highest ROI. So it doesn't get as much attention and the budget, but that gives you the best ROI. The purchase AI tools from specialized vendors, they succeed 67% of the time. Internal builds, however, succeed only one third as often. So financial services and regulated industries often build proprietary systems, but the solo efforts show higher failure rates. And also the success, how this adoption plan work, right? So the success improves when line managers drive adoption rather than centralized AI labs. They also found that effective tools are those that integrate deeply and adapt over time. And the disruption is most visible in the customer support, contact center, and administrative roles, and the companies are basically not backfilling vacated roles rather than conducting mass layoffs. Not everybody is doing mass layoff, but it's like it's silent layoffs, right? They just don't backfill those roles. And there's the widespread use of unsanctioned tools like ChatGPT in the enterprises. um, Another thing they found is that measuring AI's impact on productivity and profit still remain difficult. And finally, the advanced firms are exploring agentic AI systems that can learn, remember, and act independently. So these were some of the findings from that report that came out, Jamie.
Yeah, um, I read sort of the headlines on this. It's one of the things where uh, you want to dive deep in how they came up with their research, the facts and figures, because if you're getting the wrong input, you're going to have widely different output. And if you want to skew something one way because you're promoting something else, you're going to get different results. So to me, I would on this one, I just like tread cautiously. I definitely want to do a little bit more due diligence on my side to understand, okay, what went into it. So
True.
interesting, interesting outputs. Know the facts
Yeah.
is
And
the
one thing
bottom
I
line.
would say is, Jimmy, that people have also highlighted that there's a bit of conflict here because this initiative is driving more towards the agents. So basically, they're driving home the point that agents are the way to go. And they're kind of like pushing more towards that, like the agentic AI systems is the best way, because they're saying that biggest gap and this failure rate is because of this ability to learn. But the agentic AI systems can learn, remember, and act independently, and that's what they're trying to drive the point. But I do feel, in our experience, Jamie, I'm sure that you have like also probably similar experience, but I feel this 95% is, I think, bloated figure because anecdotally, right, in my experience, I find the success rate is much higher. I do feel that there are other aspects which actually are problematic, which are actually creating the failure, right? It may be a bloated
Yeah.
expectation, or it may be politics and other things. But I think it's not like because of the learning ability. I mean, there are tons of use cases which are not even related to too much of a learning, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that the main distinction that I'm drawing out of this is like um, personal success versus organizational success. And it's certainly true that personal productivity with these different AI tools is seeing much more increase just because I can work with me individually. But when you start to think about interconnected systems and the complexities that are associated with that, it's just inherently more complex. So yeah, you're going to see bigger failure rate, especially because, so let's be honest, people know what they were doing in the beginning stages, and I would say even some now at this point. But where we're driving to, the use of these agents, that certainly is the upside that we're all looking towards. Anyway, um, just wanted to point out a couple of quick thoughts on my end on that.
But yeah, I mean, I think overall, I would say we need report like this, which basically lead people to debate and discuss and explore these aspects as well. With that, I think we'll close the show. It went a little bit over time than what we generally strive to, but I think there were still many items that we had to discuss.
Yep, yeah, definitely. So once again, thanks, Shadab, and everybody out there on listening land, whether or not you're listening to the audio or YouTube, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers, spread the news, like and subscribe to the buttons wherever they are. Look forward to having you at the next set of episodes and in the future, and our ever growing audience. Thanks again.
And enjoy some of the last days remaining of the summer. Okay. Bye, everyone. Bye, Jimmy.